I still remember the exact weight of that leather belt in my hands. It was worn soft on the inside, the kind of brown that gets darker and more polished from years of use. I remember running my thumb over the brass buckle and feeling the tiny scratches on the metal. It was just a belt, a simple, everyday object that had no business being the catalyst for the thing that would eventually burn my entire life to the ground. But that's the thing about the moments that change everything. They never look like much when they arrive. They're dressed in the mundane. They knock on your door wearing a faded t-shirt and a nervous smile. It was a Tuesday. I know that sounds cliché, but it really was a Tuesday, the most forgettable day of the week. My husband, Mark, had left for a business trip to Chicago that morning. He was a regional sales director, always on the move, always with a carry-on bag slung over his shoulder and a half-empty travel mug of coffee in his hand. The house was quiet, which was a rare luxury. I was a freelance graphic designer, so my office was the dining room table. My coffee was getting cold, and I was stuck on a layout for a local brewery's new IPA can. My mind was on color palettes and kerning, on the dull hum of the air conditioning and the distant buzz of a lawnmower from a neighbor's yard. It was the picture of suburban tranquility, a snapshot of a life that felt safe and predictable. It was in this peaceful, boring afternoon that I heard the heavy footsteps coming down the stairs. They weren't my husband's. Mark's footsteps were confident, quick, always sounding like he was late for something. These were slower, slightly hesitant. It was my stepson, Evan. He was 21, home for the summer from his junior year at a state university. He was a good kid, quiet, a little awkward, with a gentle heart that he tried to hide behind a wall of video games and baggy clothes. "Hey," he said, his voice a little low.
He was standing in the archway between the living room and the dining room, his hands shoved into the pockets of his worn-out jeans. He was tall, broad-shouldered like his father, but he had his mother's sandy brown hair and her blue eyes. He was looking down at his feet, shuffling them a little. "Hey yourself," I said, swiveling in my chair. "What's up? You look like you're in a bind." He let out a nervous little laugh. Yeah, kind of." He looked up at me, then quickly away. "My belt, the buckle it's jammed. I've been messing with it for like 10 minutes and I can't get it to fasten. It's one of those ones with the little prong and I think it's bent, and my hands are all sweaty." He held up his hands as if to prove it. "I have to go meet my friends for a pickup basketball game at the park in like 20 minutes and I literally can't get my pants to stay up." I couldn't help but smile at his frustration. It was so endearingly a guy problem and a stepmom problem. I'd been in his life for 7 years, since he was a scrawny, sullen 14-year-old who'd just lost his mother to a long battle with cancer. I'd watched him grow from a boy who could barely look me in the eye to this young man who sometimes asked me for advice about girls in classes. There was a warmth in that, a sense of accomplishment. I'd never tried to replace his mother, just be a consistent, solid presence in his life. And part of that presence meant helping him out with stupid, practical stuff like a jammed belt buckle. "Come here, let me see it," I said, getting up from my chair. "I'm a master with stubborn fasteners." He walked over to where I was standing by the dining room table. He was a good foot taller than me, and I had to tilt my head up to see his face. He was blushing, a slight pinkness creeping up his neck. He was embarrassed. It was a moment of vulnerability, asking his stepmom for help with something that felt so childish. "Okay, show me the damage," I said. He fumbled with the front of his jeans, his fingers clumsy. He pulled the worn leather belt through the first loop, and I saw the problem immediately. The prong was slightly bent, but more than that, the leather was too thick for the buckle opening. He was trying to force it, and it was getting stuck halfway through. It was a solid belt, military style, the kind you buy at a surplus store. It had seen better days. "Okay, I see the issue," I said, my voice taking on a practical, problem-solving tone. "The leather is just a little too thick for that slot. You've been trying to brute force it, but what you need to do is kind of wiggle it through at an angle." I reached out and took the belt from his hands. It was warm from his body heat. I bent the prong back with my fingers. Then I held the buckle open and looked at him. "Turn around. Let me just do it for you. It'll be faster." He hesitated for just a second, his eyes meeting mine. There was a flicker of something in them, a quick glance that I didn't have time to process. Then he turned around. I stepped closer,
The dining room was bathed in the honey-colored light of the late afternoon sun, streaming through the windows and illuminating dust motes that danced in the air. It was quiet. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and the steady tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway. I was close to him, close enough to smell his cologne, something clean and woodsy, a cheaper version of something his father wore. I could smell the faint scent of his laundry detergent, and his presence was different. He was a young man, not a boy. The breadth of his shoulders, the way his t-shirt stretched across his back, the strong column of his neck. The realization hit me, a strange and unwelcome thought that I immediately pushed away. This was Evan, my stepson, the kid who'd asked me to help him with his algebra homework. I took the two ends of the belt in my hands, bringing them together around his waist. The denim of his jeans was soft and worn, and I could feel the heat of his body through it. My arms were around him, almost like I was hugging him from behind. I slid the prong of the buckle through the hole, and the leather was indeed stubborn. I had to put a little muscle into it, pushing it through with a sharp, hard thrust. And that's when it happened. The jeans he was wearing were loose, a size too big, probably a hand-me-down from his father. He hadn't bothered to hold them up while I was fumbling with the belt, and the force of me pushing the prong through pulled the buckle forward and down. It was a perfect, unfortunate physics equation. The heavy denim, released from any tension, simply slipped down his hips. It didn't fall all the way to the floor, but it dropped just enough, a few inches, just past his hips. It was a split second, a fraction of a moment that should have been nothing. He should have grabbed his pants. I should have stepped back. But neither of us moved. We were frozen in place. His back was still to me, and I saw the jut of his hip bones, the trail of dark hair that ran from his navel and disappeared below the waistband of his boxers. His boxers. They were black, and they were clinging to the firm curve of his ass. The sight of it, so intimate, so private, so utterly unexpected, hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't just the surprise. It was the sight of it, of him. He was no longer a boy in my mind. In that single, horrifying second, he was a man. My breath caught in my throat, a sharp, sudden intake of air that seemed deafening in the quiet room. My hands were still holding the ends of the belt, my fingers gripping the worn leather, my knuckles white. I was a statue. My mind went completely blank. It was a sensory overload. The warmth of his skin, the faint scent of his sweat mixed with the cologne, the sight of his body, a body that wasn't my husband's, a body I had no business seeing. Time stretched. It felt like an eternity. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic, wild rhythm I couldn't control. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. Everything was amplified. The sound of my own breathing, the heavy silence between us, the slow realization of the absolute inappropriateness of what was happening. I felt a wave of heat wash over me, starting in my chest and spreading up to my face. It was shame, pure, unadulterated shame. Then Evan moved. It was a jerk, a sudden, panicked motion. He grabbed the waistband of his jeans and yanked them back up, his hands shaking as he fumbled with the belt buckle, shoving it through the hole himself. He didn't turn around. He just stood there, his shoulders rigid, his breathing rapid. And it was in that horrible, silent moment that something shifted in the air between us. The atmosphere had changed from casual, familial, to something charged and electric, something I didn't have a name for. It was the moment the rules were broken, even if it was an accident. The boundary had been crossed, and we both knew it couldn't be uncrossed. I finally let go of the belt. I took a stumbling step back, my hands falling to my sides. I felt like I was standing on a cliff, looking down. "Thanks," he mumbled to the floor. His voice was hoarse, barely a whisper. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He started backing away, his face pale, his eyes wide and panicked. He looked like a deer caught in headlights. He turned and practically ran out of the dining room. I heard his heavy footsteps on the stairs, the slam of his bedroom door. The sound echoed in the silent house. I was left standing in the middle of the dining room, the afternoon sun still warm on my skin, the scent of his cologne still lingering in the air around me. The world seemed too quiet. My coffee was cold. My work was waiting. But I was utterly paralyzed. my mind a roaring storm of confusion, guilt, and a terrifying unbidden thought that I was too afraid to name.
I just stood there, staring at the empty space where he had been, trying to convince myself that what had just happened was nothing, an awkward accident that would be forgotten by dinner. But deep down, in the part of my heart I didn't want to acknowledge, I knew that was a lie. That brief, accidental moment of intimacy had changed everything, and the life I thought I knew was already starting to unravel at the seams. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the king-sized bed that suddenly felt too big, too cold, too empty, staring at the ceiling fan as it sliced the darkness into a hypnotic rhythm. Mark was in Chicago, probably asleep in a sterile hotel room, dreaming about quarterly reports and golf outings. I was here, in our house, my mind racing in circles like a wounded animal. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it again. The curve of Evan's hips, the black boxers, the way his skin looked in the golden afternoon light. And then, the most shameful part, the way I hadn't looked away fast enough, the way I hadn't stepped back the second his jeans slipped. There was a beat, a single heartbeat where I just stood there, frozen, and that beat was a betrayal in itself. I kept telling myself it was shock. That was the story I clung to like a life raft. Any normal person would freeze, right? It's a physiological response. Fight, flight, or freeze. I chose freeze. That's all it was. A biological reaction to an awkward situation. It didn't mean anything. It couldn't mean anything. Evan was my stepson. I'd watched him blow out birthday candles. I'd bandaged his scraped knee after a skateboard wipeout. I'd sat through hours of his high school graduation, sweating in the bleachers, crying because I was proud of him. He was a kid, a boy, my boy. Except he wasn't a boy anymore. And that was the uncomfortable truth my brain kept skittering away from like a stone skipping over water. The next morning, I was a ghost in my own kitchen. I made coffee, but I didn't drink it.
I just let it get cold on the counter while I stared out the window at the manicured lawn and the white picket fence that suddenly felt like a prison wall. I was waiting for the sound of Evan's footsteps on the stairs. I didn't know what I would say when I saw him. I had rehearsed a dozen different scripts in my head during the long, sleepless hours of the night. Hey, about yesterday. Sorry about that. It was awkward, right? Just one of those things. You know how it is. That was the plan. Keep it light, keep it casual. Act like it was nothing. Because it was nothing. It had to be nothing. But when he finally came down the stairs, all my careful rehearsal evaporated like morning fog. He was wearing a hoodie, the gray one with the university logo on it, his hands shoved deep in the pockets. His hair was messy, like he'd just rolled out of bed. But his eyes were what stopped me. They were red-rimmed, exhausted. He looked like he hadn't slept either. And when he walked into the kitchen, he didn't look at me. He stared at the floor, his jaw tight, his shoulders hunched like he was bracing for a blow. "Morning," I said, my voice cracking a little on the first syllable. I cleared my throat and tried again. "Morning. Want some coffee?" He shook his head, still not looking at me. "I'm good." He opened the refrigerator and stood there, staring at the contents like they held the secrets to the universe. I watched his back, the familiar curve of his spine under the soft fabric of the hoodie, and my stomach twisted into a sick knot. There it was again, that awareness, that horrible, unwanted awareness of his body, the shape of his shoulders, the way he stood, slightly off balance, one hip cocked. I hated myself for noticing. "Evan," I said softly, taking a step toward him. "About yesterday, I just want to say, don't." He cut me off. His voice was tight, clipped. He still didn't turn around. "Don't say anything. It was nothing, okay? It was just an accident." We don't have to talk about it. He grabbed a carton of orange juice and closed the refrigerator door with more force than necessary. The bottles inside rattled. He walked past me without making eye contact, heading back toward the stairs. "Evan, wait," I called after him, but he was gone. The only response was the creak of the stairs as he retreated back to his room. I stood alone in the kitchen, my heart pounding in my chest. The air was thick with unspoken words, with the weight of everything we weren't saying. He'd made it perfectly clear. He wanted to pretend it never happened. He wanted to bury it so deep that it couldn't claw its way back up. And I wanted that too. I really did. But I knew with a sickening certainty that burying something doesn't make it dead. It just makes it rot in the dark. For the next few days, the house felt like a minefield. We orbited each other like distant planets, careful never to cross paths. I started eating dinner in my office, claiming I had deadlines. He stayed in his room, the glow of his computer screen visible under the door. When we did accidentally encounter each other in the hallway or the kitchen, it was a painful dance of avoidance. A quick, muttered apology, eyes fixed firmly on the floor. The silence between us was louder than any argument we could have had. I threw myself into my work. I redesigned the brewery can 3 times, each iteration more aggressive and angular than the last. I worked until my eyes burned and my wrist ached. I tried to fill every waking moment with noise, podcasts, music, mindless television shows, anything to drown out the thoughts that kept sneaking back in. But the thoughts were relentless. They came in the shower, in the quiet moments between songs, in the darkness of my bedroom at midnight. And they grew bolder. What would have happened if he hadn't grabbed his pants? What if I hadn't stepped back? I shoved those questions down as fast as they surfaced. It was a violation. Not just of my marriage, but of my entire identity. I was a good person, a faithful wife, a decent stepmother. I didn't think about my stepson that way. I couldn't. It was sick. It was wrong. But the more I tried to deny the thought, the more it grew, like a weed that thrives on being uprooted. By Friday, the tension in the house was unbearable. I had to get out. I texted my friend Rachel, a yoga instructor with perpetually calm energy and a knack for saying exactly the right thing at exactly the wrong time. She told me to meet her at a wine bar downtown, the one with the exposed brick walls and the dim lighting that made everyone look mysterious and beautiful. Rachel was already there when I arrived, a glass of Pinot Grigio in hand and a knowing smile on her face. She was one of those women who seemed to glide through life effortlessly, her silver-streaked hair always perfect, her outfits always chic. She took one look at my face and her smile faded. "Okay, spill," she said, patting the seat next to her at the bar. "You look like someone ran over your dog. What's going on?" I slid onto the stool and ordered a glass of the same wine, my fingers drumming nervously on the polished wood. "It's nothing, just work stress. Mark's been gone all week and I've been buried in deadlines." Rachel raised an eyebrow. "Bullshit. You're a terrible liar. Your left eye twitches when you're holding something back. Look me in the eye and tell me that again." I took a long sip of wine, letting the cool liquid wash down the knot in my throat. It's been a weird week, that's all. Family stuff. You know how it is." "Family stuff?" Rachel repeated, her voice flat with skepticism. "You mean Evan? What's that kid done now? Let me guess. He left his dirty socks on the floor and you're having a crisis about it." I laughed, but it was hollow and brittle. "No, it's not that. God, Rachel, I can't even say it out loud. It's so stupid." She leaned closer, her eyes soft and encouraging. "Hey, whatever it is, it's not stupid if it's bothering you this much. You look like you haven't slept in days. Just tell me." I hesitated. The words were right there, burning on the tip of my tongue. I saw my stepson's body, and I can't stop thinking about it. I looked at him, and I felt something that wasn't maternal, something that made me feel like a monster. But I couldn't say it. Saying it would make it real. Saying it would give it power. So I took the coward's way out. It's just, things feel tense with him lately. He's been distant. I don't know. Maybe he's going through something. I just feel like I'm walking on eggshells in my own home." Rachel nodded, her expression thoughtful.
বন্ধুর নাম সেই বন্ধু যে দিল না রে আমার প্রেমের দাম কইলার মাঝে রইল স্মৃতি বন্ধু আমার নাই বন্ধুর লাগি এখন আমার কইলা পুরে যায় কইলা কাইটা দিলাম আমি আমার প্রেমের দাম বন্ধু আমার দিল না রে কইলা কাটার নাম কইলা কাইটা দিলাম আমি আমার প্রেমের দাম বন্ধু আমার দিল না রে কইলা কাটার নাম কাটিয়া প্রেমের ব্যথায় গেল হায়রে কইলা মাটিয়া মনের ভিতর জায়গা দিলাম কইলা কাটিয়া প্রেমের ব্যথায় গেল হায়রে কইলা মাটিয়া কইলা রাগাত মনে জমা বলতে পারি না বন্ধু আমায় গেল ভুলে কইলা চলো না কইলা কাটা দিলাম আমি আমার প্রেমের দাম বন্ধু আমায় দিল না রে কইলা কাটার নাম কইলা কাটা দিলাম আমি আমার প্রেমের দাম বন্ধু আমার দিল না রে কইলা কাটার নাম কইলার মাঝে নামলে কিয়া করলো বেইমানি কইলা কাটার ভালোবাসায় জন্য চোখের পানি কইলার মাঝে নামলে কিয়া করলো বেইমানি কইলা কাটার ভালোবাসায় জন্য চোখের পানি প্রাণের বন্ধু দিল আঘাত আমার কলিজা কইলা কাটার ভালোবাসার কান্না হতো ভাই কইলা কাটা দিলাম আমি আমার প্রেমের দাম বন্ধু আমার দিল না রে কইলা কাটার নাম কইলা কাটা দিলাম আমি আমার প্রেমের দাম বন্ধু আমায় দিল না রে কইলা কাটার নাম
You remember what it was like at that age. Everything feels huge and confusing. Just give him space. He'll come around. I nodded, grateful for the easy excuse. But I knew I'd just fed her a lie, and the lie sat heavy in my stomach, mixing with the wine and the guilt. When I got home that night, the house was dark. I assumed Evan was out, which was a relief. I tiptoed upstairs, feeling like an intruder in my own home, and slipped into my bedroom. I didn't turn on the lights. I just stood in the doorway, letting my eyes adjust to the dimness. And then I saw it. On my dresser, propped up against the mirror, was a folded piece of notebook paper. My name was written on the front in Evan's messy, slanted handwriting. My heart seized in my chest. I walked over to the dresser on unsteady legs, my fingers trembling as I picked up the note. I unfolded it slowly, bracing myself for something terrible. A confession, an accusation, an announcement that he was moving out, that he couldn't stand to be in the same house as me anymore. But what I read was so much worse. It was a simple, short message, only a few lines. It said, "I can't stop thinking about it either."
I'm sorry. I don't know what's wrong with me. I don't know what to do. Just tell me what to do. I read it 3 times, 4, 5. Each time the words blurred together, my vision swimming with tears I didn't even know I was crying. He was admitting it. He was pulling the thread, and the whole carefully constructed web of denial was starting to unravel. I sat down on the edge of the bed, clutching the note in my hands. My mind was a hurricane. I should have torn it up. I should have marched down the hall to his room and told him that this was wrong, that we were never going to talk about it again, that he needed to forget whatever he thought he felt. That was the right thing to do. The moral thing. The thing a good wife and stepmother would do. But I didn't do any of that. I just sat there, staring at the wall, the note crumpled in my palm. And in the silence of that empty house, I made a terrible discovery. When I read his words, I can't stop thinking about it either. A part of me felt a twisted, shameful relief. I wasn't the only one. I wasn't crazy. The moment had meant something to him too, something that had burrowed into his brain and refused to let go. That realization should have terrified me. It should have sent me running for the phone to call Mark, to confess everything, to beg for help. But instead, it did something far more dangerous. It made me feel connected to Evan in a way I'd never felt before. A secret, sordid, electric connection that hummed in the air between our rooms, just waiting to be acknowledged. I folded the note carefully and tucked it into the drawer of my nightstand, hidden beneath a stack of unread books. I didn't sleep again that night. I lay in the dark, my eyes wide open, my heart racing. I thought about the way his skin looked in that golden light, the curve of his hips, the weight of the leather belt in my hands.
And I knew, with a terrible, absolute certainty, that pretending this had never happened was no longer an option. The line had been crossed, and now the only question was what we were going to do about it. The note stayed in my nightstand for 3 days. 3 days of hell. 3 days of walking past his closed door and feeling the pull of it like a magnet. 3 days of avoiding his eyes at breakfast, of making excuses to leave the room, of pretending I didn't notice the way he lingered in the hallway outside my office. 3 days of telling myself I was going to destroy that piece of paper, burn it in the backyard grill, flush it down the toilet, do anything to erase the evidence of what was happening between us. But I never did. I couldn't. Every time I reached into that drawer, my hand would hover over the folded note, and I'd feel that sick, electric thrill again. The knowledge that someone else out there was just as tangled up in this mess as I was. It was perverse. It was wrong. And God help me, it was the only thing keeping me sane. Mark came home on Sunday night. I heard his key in the door at around 8, heard the familiar thud of his carry-on hitting the floor, heard his voice calling out for me. I was in the kitchen, pretending to chop vegetables for a salad I had no intention of eating. My hands were shaking so badly I almost cut myself. "Hey, babe," he said, wrapping his arms around me from behind. He pressed a kiss to my neck, and I flinched. I couldn't help it. His touch felt foreign, intrusive, like I was being touched by a stranger. "Missed you. How was your week?" I forced a smile, turning in his arms to face him. He looked tired but happy to be home. His hair was rumpled from the plane, his shirt wrinkled. He had the faint smell of airport coffee and recycled air clinging to him. He was my husband, my partner, the man I'd promised to love and cherish for the rest of my life. And I couldn't look him in the eye.
"Busy," I said, my voice too bright, too brittle. "You know how it is. Deadlines. I barely left the house." He laughed, pulling me closer. "Well, I'm home now. Let's order takeout and watch that movie you wanted to see. The one with the zombies and the guy with the funny accent. I've been thinking about it all week." I wanted to say yes. I wanted to fall back into the comfortable rhythm of our marriage, to let him wrap me up in his easy affection and pretend the last week had never happened. But I couldn't, because even as he held me, my mind was elsewhere. Upstairs, in the room at the end of the hall, with the note hidden in my nightstand, and the boy who'd written it. "I'm actually kind of tired," I said, pulling away. "Maybe tomorrow?" He looked disappointed, but he nodded. "Sure. You look exhausted, honestly. I'll order something for myself and let you get some sleep. You okay?" No, I was not okay. I was the furthest thing from okay. I was standing in my kitchen, lying to my husband, and feeling nothing but relief when he accepted my lie without question. "I'm fine," I said, "just tired." He kissed my forehead and headed for the living room, pulling out his phone to order dinner. I stood at the counter, staring at the half-chopped vegetables, my heart pounding. I had to tell him. I had to confess everything, right now, before this thing between me and Evan grew any bigger. It was still small enough to contain. It was still just an awkward moment and a poorly written note. It could still be explained away. If I told Mark now, he would be hurt, confused, maybe even angry. But we would get through it. We always got through things. But I didn't tell him. Because even as I opened my mouth to speak, I heard a sound from upstairs. A door creaking open. Footsteps on the landing. And then Evan appeared at the top of the stairs, his silhouette backlit by the hall light. He was wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt, his hair messy, his feet bare.
He looked down at the living room, where his father was sitting on the couch, scrolling through a menu on his phone. And then his eyes found mine. The look that passed between us was a bullet. It went straight through me, piercing every wall I tried to build. It was hungry and desperate and terrified. It was the look of two people standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing they were about to fall and being too afraid to step back. It was an acknowledgement, a silent confirmation that the note had been seen, had been felt, had changed everything. I looked away first. I had to. If I'd held his gaze for a second longer, I would have shattered. The next few days were a masterclass in deception. I became an actress in my own life, performing the role of the happy wife and stepmother while my insides rotted. I made dinner, I did laundry, I laughed at Mark's jokes.
তোর কারণে শেষ করিলাম ইহকাল আর পরকাল, তোর কারণে শেষ করিলাম ইহকাল আর পরকাল। কে জানিত হবে এমন পুরিবে কপাল আমার, কে জানিত হবে এমন পুরিবে কপাল। দুঃখের পরে আসে রে সুখ, আমার বেলায় নাই। আবেগে তাকাইলেই যেন প্লাবন হইয়া যায়। দুঃখের পরে আসে রে সুখ, আমার বেলায় নাই। আবেগে তাকাইলেই যেন প্লাবন হইয়া যায়। যতনে তুলিয়া গাছে টাইনা টাইনা তুলে সাল, কে জানি তো হবে এমন পুরিবে কপাল আমার, কে জানি তো হবে এমন পুরিবে কপাল। কাদা মাটি মিশ্র কইরা বানাইলাম এক পাখি, কারণ সারাই নোটিশ দিয়া করিল চালাকি। কাদামাটি মিশ্র কইরা বানাইলাম এক পাখি, কারণ সারাই নোটিশ দিয়া করিল চালাকি। কই মল্লিকে মরলেই বাঁচি, আমার নিশির নাই সকাল, কে জানি তো হবে এমন পুরিবে কপাল আমার, কে জানি তো হবে এমন পুরিবে কপাল। তোর কারণে শেষ করিলামি হকাল আর পরকাল, তোর কারণে শেষ করিলামি হকাল আর পরকাল, কে জানি তো হবে এমন পুরিবে কপাল আমার, কে জানি তো হবে এমন পুরিবে কপাল।
As far away from me as possible. I pretended not to notice the way he flinched when I accidentally brushed against him in the kitchen. I pretended not to notice the way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't watching. But I was watching. I was always watching. I catalogued every detail of him. The way his jaw tightened when he was frustrated, the way he ran his fingers through his hair when he was nervous, the way his eyes flickered to me every time his father laughed at something I said. I was consumed by him, and I hated myself for it. It was Wednesday when things came to a head. Mark had left for work early, and I was alone in the house. I was in the laundry room, folding clothes, trying to lose myself in the mindless rhythm of the task. The dryer hummed, the fabric softener scent filling the air. It was so normal, so domestic. And then I heard the front door open and close. My heart leaped into my throat. I knew it was him. I could feel it, a sixth sense that had developed over the past week.
I didn't move. I just stood there, frozen, a sock in my hand, listening to his footsteps cross the living room. They stopped in the archway to the laundry room. "Hey," he said. His voice was low, rough. He sounded like he hadn't slept in days. He probably hadn't. I turned around slowly. He was standing in the doorway, his hands shoved in his pockets, his face pale and drawn. He looked like a man about to confess to a crime. "Hey," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Your dad's at work." "I know." He stepped into the room and the door swung shut behind him. We were alone, together, in a small enclosed space. The dryer was still humming, the warm air filling the room. It felt like the walls were closing in. "Evan, we shouldn't be doing this," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. I was saying the words I was supposed to say, but I didn't believe them. Not anymore. "Then tell me what to do," he said, his voice cracking. "Tell me to forget it. Tell me to leave. Tell me to transfer schools and never come back. Tell me anything. Just tell me something. I can't keep living like this." He was standing right in front of me now, close enough that I could see the pulse beating in his throat. His eyes were wet, his jaw trembling. He was on the verge of breaking, and I was the only one who could catch him. "Evan," I said, my voice breaking, "I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to do. This is wrong. You know that, right? We can't." But I didn't finish the sentence, because he reached out and took my hand. His fingers were warm, calloused. He held my hand like it was something precious, something he was afraid to break. "Tell me you don't feel it," he whispered. "Tell me you don't think about it. Tell me you don't think about me, and I'll walk away. I swear. I'll walk away and never look back." I should have lied. I should have told him exactly what he wanted to hear.
I should have ripped my hand away and walked out of that room and never looked back. But I couldn't, because he was right. I did feel it. I did think about it. I did think about him. Every waking moment, every sleepless night, every time I closed my eyes. "I can't," I whispered, the truth spilling out of me like poison from a wound. "I can't tell you that." His face crumpled with relief. He pulled me into his arms, and I didn't resist. I leaned into him, my face pressed against his chest, listening to the frantic beat of his heart. He was so warm, so solid, so real. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt alive. We stood there for what felt like hours, wrapped in each other. The dryer finished its cycle and clicked off, plunging the room into sudden silence. The only sound was our breathing, ragged and uneven. And then he pulled back, his hands cupping my face, tilting my head up to look at him. "What are we doing?" I asked, my voice trembling. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I don't want to stop." He kissed me. It was a soft kiss at first, tentative, like he was testing the waters. But then it deepened, and suddenly I was lost in it. His lips were warm, his stubble rough against my chin. He tasted like coffee and desperation, and I kissed him back with everything I had. When we finally cooled apart, we were both breathing hard. His forehead rested against mine, his eyes closed. Neither of us spoke. There were no words for what had just happened. There was only the weight of it, the enormity of it, pressing down on us. "We can't tell anyone," I finally said. "Not yet. Not until we figure this out." He nodded, his eyes still closed. "I know. I won't say anything." "And we have to be careful. Your dad—" "I know," he cut me off, pulling back to look at me. There was fear in his eyes, but there was also something else, something that looked almost like hope. "I'll be careful. I'll do whatever you want. Just don't push me away. Please."
I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. I reached up and touched his cheek, tracing the line of his jaw with my thumb. He leaned into my touch like a starving man, and my heart shattered into a million pieces. What were we doing? We were playing with fire. We were walking a tightrope with no net. We were two people who had lost their minds, who had thrown caution and decency to the wind. And yet, standing in that laundry room, the scent of fabric softener in the air and the taste of him still on my lips, I couldn't bring myself to care. The next few weeks were a fever dream. We became experts at secrecy. We found moments alone whenever we could. A stolen kiss in the kitchen when Mark was in the shower. A whispered conversation in the backyard while Mark was on a conference call. A lingering touch in the hallway when we passed each other on the stairs. It was reckless and dangerous, and every moment of it was electric. But the guilt was relentless. It followed me everywhere. It sat next to me at dinner, its cold hand on my shoulder. It lay beside me in bed, a third presence in the space between me and my husband. Every time Mark kissed me, I felt like a traitor. Every time he told me he loved me, I felt like a liar. And yet, I couldn't stop. The pull was too strong. The need was too overwhelming. Evan was like a drug. He consumed me, body and soul. I thought about him constantly, the way his hands felt on my skin, the way he said my name, the way he looked at me like I was the only person in the world. He made me feel beautiful and desired and young. He made me forget that I was a wife, a stepmother, a grown woman who should have known better. But reality has a way of crashing down on you when you least expect it. And for us, that crash came in the form of a forgotten photograph. It was a Saturday, the kind of lazy, golden afternoon that felt like it had been borrowed from a painting.
The kind where the sunlight slants through the windows in thick, honey-colored beams, and the world outside seems to hold its breath. Mark was in the backyard, grilling burgers for dinner. I could hear him through the open kitchen window, whistling an old Springsteen tune, the sizzle of meat hitting the hot grill, mingling with the scent of charcoal in summer. It was the soundtrack of a happy life, a normal life, the life I was systematically dismantling with every stolen glance and every whispered word. Evan was in the living room, supposedly doing homework. I was in the kitchen, pretending to make a salad. We were both pretending, and that was the heart of it. Pretending to be normal, pretending to be family, pretending that the heat between us wasn't a living, breathing thing that had taken up residence in every corner of the house. He came into the kitchen while I was chopping cucumbers. I heard his footsteps, felt his presence before he even spoke. That strange sixth sense again, the one that had developed over the past few weeks. I could feel him in my bones. "Can I get a drink?" he asked, his voice casual,
but his eyes were anything but. They were dark, hungry. They swept over me like a physical touch. "Sure," I said, not looking up from the cutting board. "Fridge." He walked past me, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating off his body. He opened the refrigerator, bent down to grab a bottle of water. The movement was deliberate, slow. He knew I was watching. He knew I couldn't help myself. And then he straightened up and turned to face me. The refrigerator door swung shut, cutting off the cool air. We were alone, just for a moment, a brief, stolen pocket of time. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. He just walked toward me, his steps slow and measured, until he was standing right in front of me. I was still holding the knife, my hands frozen over the cutting board.
He reached out and gently took the knife from my hand, setting it down on the counter. And then he took my face in his hands and kissed me. It was a deep kiss, a hungry kiss. He kissed me like he was drowning and I was air. I melted into him, my hands gripping his shirt, pulling him closer. I had stopped fighting it. I had stopped trying to be good. The guilt was still there, always there, a constant hum in the back of my mind. But it was quieter now, drowned out by the roar of my own desire. He pulled back, his forehead resting against mine, his breathing ragged. "I can't stop thinking about you," he whispered. "Every second, every minute, I can't focus on anything else." "Me neither," I admitted, my voice shaking. "This is insane. We're insane." "I know." He kissed my forehead, my nose, the corner of my mouth. "But I don't care. I don't care about anything except you." And then we heard the back door open. We sprang apart like we'd been electrocuted. Evan grabbed his water bottle and took a step back, his face pale. I spun around to face the stove, grabbing a pot and pretending to inspect it. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure it would give me away. Mark walked in, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Burgers are almost done. What's for salad?" He was smiling, oblivious. He had no idea. No idea that his wife and his son had just been wrapped in each other's arms in his kitchen. No idea that his entire world was about to implode. "Just the usual," I said, my voice strained. I didn't turn around. I couldn't look at him. I was afraid my face would betray me. "Cucumbers, tomatoes, the vinaigrette you like." "Perfect." He walked over to the fridge, opened it, and pulled out a beer. "Evan, you want one? You're 21 now. You can drink with your old man." Evan laughed, a hollow, fake sound. "Nah, I'm good. Gotta focus on this homework." He held up the water bottle as evidence. "Rain check?" "Sure, kid." Mark clapped him on the shoulder, and the gesture was so affectionate, so innocent, it made my stomach turn. "You're a good son. I'm proud of you." Evan's face flickered. For a split second, I saw the guilt, the shame, the self-loathing. And then it was gone, replaced by a mask of calm. "Thanks, Dad." He left the kitchen, and I was alone with my husband. Mark opened his beer and took a long, satisfied sip. He was in his element. He had his family, his home, his weekend. He had everything he'd ever wanted. And I was about to take it all away from him. "Babe, you okay?" he asked, frowning. "You look a little pale." I forced a smile. "Just tired. Long week." He nodded, accepting the lie. He always accepted the lies. It was easier than questioning them. That night, I lay in bed beside Mark, staring at the ceiling. He was asleep, his breathing deep and even. I could feel the warmth of him next to me, the familiar weight of his arm draped over my waist. And I felt nothing. No love, no affection, no tenderness. Just a cold, hollow emptiness that had taken root in my chest. I was a ghost in my own marriage, a stranger in my own skin. I don't know when it happened. I don't know when I stopped loving Mark and started wanting his son. But it had happened, and there was no going back. The next morning, I was in the living room, scrolling through my phone, when I heard a crash from upstairs. It was loud, jarring, a sound of things breaking. I heard Evan curse, and then footsteps, heavy and frantic. I ran up the stairs, my heart in my throat. "Evan, are you okay?" I pushed open his door and found him standing in the middle of the room, his back to me. He was surrounded by wreckage, a shattered picture frame on the floor, glass everywhere. The picture itself was face down, a casualty of his anger. "Evan?" I said again, my voice softer now. He turned to face me, and my blood ran cold. His face was a mask of fury and pain. His eyes were red-rimmed, his jaw tight. He was holding his phone in his hand, his knuckles white. "Look at this," he said, his voice barely a whisper. He held out the phone. "Look at this, and tell me what to do." I took the phone from him, my hands shaking. It was a text message thread between him and someone named Jenna, a girl from his school. I scrolled through it, my heart sinking with every word. It was a conversation about a party that had happened months ago, before the summer had started. A party where Evan had gotten drunk and told Jenna a secret he'd been carrying for years. "I don't know why I'm telling you this," he'd written. "It's so messed up, but I've always had this weird thing for my stepmom. It's been there since I was like 16. I've never told anyone. I've never even admitted it to myself. I can't help it. She's the first thing I think about in the morning and the last thing I think about at night. I hate it. I hate myself for it, but I can't stop." I read it 3 times. 4. The words blurred and swam in front of my eyes. My stomach dropped, and I felt like I was falling into a pit of darkness with no bottom. "Evan," I started, but I couldn't finish. I didn't know what to say. He snatched the phone back from me. "She just sent me this. She screenshotted it. She's been holding on to it for months. She's going to post it. She's going to send it to my dad. She's going to destroy everything." I looked at him, at the panic and the shame in his eyes, and I felt my own fear mirroring his. This was it. The moment we'd been dreading. The moment our secret stopped being a secret. "What do we do?" I asked, my voice cracking. "I don't know," he said, his voice breaking. "I don't know. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to fix this." I walked toward him, stepping over the broken glass. I took his face in my hands, just like he'd done to me in the kitchen. "We're going to figure this out," I said, trying to sound calm, trying to sound strong. "We're going to figure this out together." He looked at me with such desperation, such need. He was just a boy, a broken, terrified boy who had made a terrible mistake. And I was the woman who had made it worse. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry. I should never have told her. I should never have said anything. I ruined everything." "No," I said, my voice fierce. "You didn't ruin anything. We're going to fix this." But even as I said the words, I knew they were lies. There was no fixing this. There was only the falling. And we had already fallen so far. The rest of the day was a blur. We spent hours strategizing, panicking, coming up with plans that fell apart as soon as we voiced them. We considered telling Mark the truth, confessing everything and begging for forgiveness. We considered lying our way out of it, claiming the text was a joke, a misunderstanding, a prank. Every option felt impossible. Every option felt like the end. And through it all, Mark was downstairs, oblivious. He was watching football, laughing at the commercials. He was living in a world that was about to come crashing down around him. By the evening, we had made a decision, a reckless, desperate decision. We were going to talk to Jenna. Evan was going to call her, beg her, try to convince her to keep the secret. And if that didn't work, we would deal with the fallout together. I went to my room to wait for his call. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands clasped in my lap, my mind racing. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I was a prisoner in my own life, waiting for the guillotine to fall. And then I heard his voice, soft at first, then louder. He was arguing, pleading. His voice cracked, and I could hear the tears in it. And then a final, desperate plea. "Please, Jenna, please don't do this. I'll do anything, please." There was a pause, and then a click. The call had ended. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Evan. "She won't do it. She's sending it to my dad tonight. It's over." I stared at the screen, my vision blurring with tears. It was over. Everything was over. I walked down the hall to Evan's room. I opened the door and found him sitting on the floor, his back against the bed, his head in his hands. He was crying, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I sat down next to him, and I pulled him into my arms. I held him like I would hold a child, rocking him gently. We were 2 broken people, clinging to each other in the dark. "I'm scared," he whispered. "I'm so scared." "Me too," I admitted. "But we'll get through this.
Whatever happens, we'll get through it. I didn't know if I believed it, but I had to say it. I had to give him something to hold on to. We sat there for hours, wrapped in each other's arms, waiting for the world to end. And then, at some point, I fell asleep, exhausted, defeated, dreaming of a life I could never have again. I woke up to the sound of shouting. Mark's voice, loud and angry and devastated. I opened my eyes and found myself in Evan's room, in Evan's arms. And the door was open. Mark was standing in the doorway, his face pale, his eyes wide. He was holding his shaking phone in his hand, and his mouth was open in a silent scream. "Dad," Evan said, scrambling to his feet. "Dad, it's not what it looks like." But it was exactly what it looked like. The world exploded.